Okay, so our first unit, regardless of you're going to take dash 1 or dash 2, and maybe you know, maybe you don't know, I don't care. So either way, we're starting with algebra. And really, to me, algebra is one of the most fundamental skills you're going to need regardless of which course you take. What's algebra? Someone would ask you, what is algebra? What do you say? Yeah, I mean, that's actually exactly what I was going to say. Often algebra is solving for x. So then you might ask the question, why? Who cares? Right? And I've said this once before, that's not the point, right? The goal here is that it's a puzzle, it's a problem-solving exercise where it's not that, like in this joke right here, yesterday x was 2, now it's 3. It's more about the skills that you build by solving problems. Right? That's where the math really goes. So, although yes, we're going to solve for what x equals, that's not really the goal. The goal is to problem solve, right? To build those skills, to build those problem solving abilities. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start building those skills we need. Math, I mean, I pulled this off of Wikipedia. This is pretty techy, eh? Math is the abstract studies of topics such as numbers, structure, space, and change. Okay, that doesn't really narrow it down. Essentially, though, I found this picture on here. There's so many different branches of math. Like you could do trigonometry. Trigonometry studies angles and shapes, triangles usually. Geometry is kind of an extension of that. Does anybody know what topology is? It's related to like geography. Topography maps. Topography, if I'm wrong, is like when they study how like in 3 dimensions, like a mountain range might be. That's topography. This is topology. Maybe it's different. Statistics, studying like say like hockey stats. Who's the best player, trying to figure out who's got the highest goals average and stuff. But really, to me, this tree, it really starts with this thing right here, arithmetic, and then algebra. Arithmetic is, do you know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide? Those are essentially the 4 basic operations that we have to have down pat. Right? So the good news is you get a calculator, right? Bad news is that probably if you've been relying on a calculator for the last little while, some of those skills have atrophied. What I want you to do today is do all this with a calculator. Let's see whether we can rebuild some of those skills because we need those, right? You can't just do it all with a calculator. Before I get to that, here's some pictures with all the different places that math can take you. There are so many different fields of math. Like it's crazy. And most of these would be like, if you want to do this, you're probably looking at the dash 1 stream. Truthfully, that's not really intended for most people though. Please don't take that as a slight. That's not meant to be something bad. Here's a picture with just all the different sciences and how math is in there. Yeah, more pictures. Doesn't matter. Here's our arithmetic. Here's my first challenge for you. Here are 8 questions, all of which are something that you have done at some point in your life. You should have focused. Do it without a calculator. That's my challenge for you, right? Can you do it without a calculator? There are 8. Let's see how many you can get. Have you learned how to multiply decimals at some point in your life? I'm sure you have, right? But you've forgotten, right? The skill is atrophied, right? My goal is to try to help you rebuild those skills again so that you can do it. Not because you're going to need to multiply decimals in real life. You have a calculator to do that, right? The goal, though, is can you build a skill? Can you do something, right? So I know you've done it before. Problem solve. See what you can do. Just don't use a calculator. Oh, that's great. Should I do anything? Alright, why don't we go through these together as a group? Let's see what you guys can do without just kind of going in cold turkey. Okay, start the first one. 3 plus 6. Alright, hopefully you got that one. Good so far, right? Yeah. Okay, well, after getting that first one, then now for the challenging ones. So, probably with multiplying, you might have learned to do this at some point. You do 1.2 and 8.5, and you like to stack them on top of each other. You probably learned that at some point, right? So, then the method, oh goodness, I need to not make mistakes. So then you go like something like this. 5 times 2 is 10, right? So then the way this works, I know this is goofy, but you put the 1 here and the 0 down there. Then you do 5 times 1 is 5. Add 1 more to get you 6. Does that sound familiar at all? Like you've learned this skill at some point. Then for the next row, now that you've done 5 times 2 and 5 times 1, you're now going to go 8 times 2 and 8 times 1. But before you do that, there's another strange rule where you throw a 0 right here. So then you go 8 times 2 gives you 16. Actually, this little 1 up there. And then 8 times 1 is 8. Add 1 more. No. So then you get this mess. Then the last little bit is that you take these two things and you add them together. So 0 and 0 is 0. 6 and 6 is 12. This is that carrying 1 thing again there. 1 and 9 gives you 10. And there's one more really weird rule that, again, you learned this rule at some point, but you've forgotten, is you count how many decimal places you have. There's 1 decimal place right here and 1 right here, which means you need 2 decimal places. So this will be the first one. That'll be the second one. So you put a decimal right there. And this is 10.2. I promise you, you've done this at some point, probably in grade like 4 or 5 or something, right? So you forgot. You need to know how to do that. No, you have a calculator. Why am I making you do it though? To build a skill, yeah, to build a skill, right? That's the point here. Right? It's not about the right answer. If it's all just about finding a right answer, grab Siri on your phone and ask her, hey Siri, what's 8.5 times 1.2? But that doesn't help you learn. Anybody get that? Let's try the next one. Integers. What if you have -2 minus -8? What's the rule with like double subtracting a negative? It's a positive, yeah. So -2, so you're 2 in the whole. You add 8. You maybe think of a number line. The answer is 6. Okay, it's not bad. Okay, here's another crazy one, right? I mean, when do you need to know how to do division like this? You don't. Like I said, grab a calculator. Ask Siri how to do it. Who cares? But that's not the point. The point here is we're trying to build muscles. We're trying to build skills, thinking skills in your brain, right? So at some point in your life, you would have learned how to make 14 groups out of 157. You would have. It's just, you don't do it anymore, right? So you'd say 14 goes into 157, something like this. Maybe you've seen that pattern before. 14 goes into 157. So then you look at something like this. Can 14 go into the number 1? And it actually can't. So then you might have said, can 14 go into the number 15? Yes, it can. How many 14s are there in the number 15? I'd say there's 1. So you put a 1 up here. Then you might have learned to go 1 times 14 is 14. You put a line here, you subtract. And again, you might ask yourself, why do we do all this stuff? Honestly, that's not relevant. The relevancy is, can you learn how to solve a problem using the steps I give you? If your boss at work tells you, I need you to do this, and he gives you some steps, sometimes it's not so much the, when am I going to use this in life that matters, is, can I just solve the problem the way you've showed me how? So, 15 minus 14 gives you a 1. You guys remember what to do next? You drop down the 7, and then you say, how many times does 14 go into 17? And 1, right? So then 1 times 14 gives you 14. Subtract it, there's 3 left over. So the answer is, you can make 11 groups with a remainder of 3. Again, you've learned this skill. I guarantee you have. You just forgot. Alright, adding fractions. Oh, bane of our existence sometimes. Does anyone remember what you need to have in order to add a fraction? Common denominators, yeah, that's the term, yeah. So this kind of stinks because we need to find a common denominator between 15 and 7. I'm not really sure there's a good one. So here's how I showed you to do this. I'm going to times this fraction right here by 15 over 15. That's valid mathematically because it's like timesing by 1, right? 15 over 15 is 1. You know it's times by 1. And what I'm going to do over here, this is how I show my students at least. I times by 7 over 7. Because again, that's like timesing by 1. That's valid. It's not changing the question. So then what you do is you have to go, what is 7 times 8? That's 56. Hopefully you didn't need a calculator for that one, but if so, maybe do a quick brush up on math facts. Right here, I got to do 4 times 15. 60. Yeah. So we have 56 and 60, and then on the bottom we're going to have one big denominator, and that's whatever 7 groups of 15 is. 115 or 105? 105? And then the last step would be to add the numerators. So you'd have 116 over 105, which may even be something you can reduce, but I'm not even going to go there yet. That was hard enough. Again, I'm going to say this probably 8 times for these ones here. You've learned this, right? You've forgotten it. Why? Well, truthfully, it's not important. No one on the street is going to ask you, hey, Ben, can you add these numbers for me? Why would it? Yeah, use a calculator, right? That's not the point, right? I need you to change your mind here, okay? That's not why we're doing math right now. I will, by the way, try to find a ton of examples as to where it's relevant in real life, because math totally is. But that's not what we're doing right now. We're just trying to build some skills so that your brain is stronger. Okay, for this next one here, dividing fractions, you might have heard a rule once before. Again, sometimes these rules just seem obscure, and you'd ask why. And by the way, I can give you reasons why. Like, I'm not going to go into detail right now. But you might have learned that you can flip the second fraction upside down. It's called multiplying by a reciprocal. Again, there's reasons why it's valid, but what you do is you take the 9 over 2, you flip her upside down, and now you times. Timesing fractions is actually really easy. 3 times 2 is 6 on the top. 5 times 9 is 45. You probably can reduce that, but we'll cover that later. These last ones is actually Math 10 curriculum. I know because I'm getting the kids in grade 10 right now ready to do this. The answer to this is root 63. Because what you do is you take the 3 and the 21 and you just times them together to get root 63. But typically you're not done yet at this point. Maybe this is something, I don't know how you were shown by Quan last year. What you might do is you might take root 63 and you break it back up into factors. You'd say 63 is like, say, 9 times 7. And then you might say something like 9 is actually 3 times 3 times 7. And you say, hey, there's 2 3's right here. You can actually pull the 3's outside of the square root sign and call it 3 root 7. Now, I don't know how they were shown to do that. But this is something you would have learned, turning an entire radical into a mixed radical. This is how it was last year, I guarantee it. Anybody get that? Last one's exponents. Another rule for exponents? You do, yeah. You add them. So if you have, you're going to have a 2 to the power of -4, essentially, because the 3 and the 7 subtract each other. What does a negative exponent mean? A negative exponent means this. It means 1 over 2 to the 4. And then 2 to the 4 is 16, so this is 1/16. Okay, so here's the first thing I need to know. If this was like, don't sweat it, because this is not what we're doing this year. But I'm doing this to illustrate a point. These are skills that at one point in your life you learned. You wrote tests on them, and you passed those tests. Someone said, you are good enough to move on to the next level. And that's good, but did it stick with you that well, probably? I'm guessing not, but that's fine. The goal here, though, is let's rebuild some of these skills, right? Because we're going to have to build and extend on those. Is this everyday life math, adding fractions, adding exponents? No, right? That's not the whole question of when am I ever going to use this in life? That's the wrong question to ask. The question to ask is this helping me become smarter? Are these skills that I can use to do other problems? So I do need you guys, though, to know how to do some of the basic operations, right? So adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Those are some of the basic ones. So here's what I'll say. These journals that I'm building here, I would spend a ton of time on that. But if you can recognize, man, I have forgotten how to do fractions, find a page in here when we come back on Tuesday, take your do-it tanks, and just find a couple of questions to try. Call me over, I'll work with you. You know what I mean? But find something that you know, oh yeah, I should practice that. So here's where I want to end. Now that I've kind of talked briefly about arithmetic, now we actually make it harder. Arithmetic, all those were numbers. Now we're going to do this with letters. Why? Is there a purpose to it? I promise you, yes. Algebra has applicability? Sure, that's a word. In real life, right? But you know, one of the reasons why we teach you algebra is just because it's the next stage up. Now it's more challenging. Rather than working with like a concrete number that you can type in your calculator, what if I tell you that you have x's in all these different locations? Again, this is just skill building. So here's your homework assignment. Solve as many of these as you can for Tuesday. You have learned the skills to solve these at some point. Please don't freak out if you get them wrong, right? That's not the point here, but see what you can do. See what you've learned. Does that make sense? So try some of these. See if you can solve them. I mean, the first one should be a little bit easier than the rest, but give it a try, okay? So what time are we at now? 7:15? So you have about 8 minutes before whatever bell goes here. So maybe try a couple before we leave. Try to finish some.